Hello, I'm Judy Stiles, General Manager of KGCS-TV. This year marks the 30th anniversary of television at Missouri Southern State University. Throughout the years, we've had a wide variety of programmings, and the key to our success has been providing opportunities for students as we serve the campus and the community. I invite you to stay tuned as we feature one of our programs from the archives on KGCS Rewind.
Newsmakers is a production of Missouri Southern Television.
Judy Stiles, thank you for joining us for this special edition of Newsmakers. Well, the world of broadcasting has changed tremendously over the short years of its history. At Missouri Southern State College, a program is held each year to recognize someone who's helped lead us to where we are today. My guest today is one of our Pioneer Broadcast Award recipients, actually the second person in this program that we've started, Mr. Austin Harrison. Thank you very much for being here today.
Oh, thank you. My pleasure, Judy.
We had a program at Missouri Southern State College in which you were announced the 1998 Pioneer Broadcast recipient. Tell me a little bit about your feelings, reaction as this award was presented to you here in the Joplin area.
Well, I was quite surprised, to tell you the truth, and of course you wanted that anyway, I guess, and I really thought it was sort of a mini family reunion that I was going to participate in here, and invited to come and participate in what I thought was just a forum of some kind, which I've been involved in from time to time over the years. And then when this unfolded, I was just totally speechless, almost, for a little bit. It was really a wonderful, wonderful honor, and very nice, and I greatly, greatly appreciated it. But it was quite a surprise.
What is it like to be able to return to the community where your broadcasting steps were taken to actually become in starting the ownership steps of owning stations?
Well, very, very, very good, because even though I've been away from here as a place of residence for about 35 years, it's always been home. And even though I've been away for a long time, we have always, every year, come back at least twice a year. And we have a few relatives in the area, and many, many friends, both in Carthage, my hometown, and Joplin, which is my second hometown, because we were in business there for so many years. And it's a good feeling. I enjoy it every time.
Now, you were, of course, a Carthage native. For our viewers, perhaps tell us a little bit about, I guess, not the whole life story, but you grew up in this area, so you were born and raised in this area?
Yes, yes, I did. Actually, when I was quite young, we and the family lived on a farm, actually, for a couple of years over near Sarcoxy. But Carthage is my hometown, and I had a wonderful time growing up there in the grade schools and again in high school. And looking back on it, as I get older, it sort of seems like that the high school years were the most wonderful years that I had in Carthage, because I still have a lot of old friends, and we have class reunions and many class reunions, and we've sort of kept that spirit together, because most of us were sort of a product of what we call the Depression years, and believe me, they were Depression years back in those days.
So you've had that sense of community and fellowship throughout those years from everybody you went to school with.
Indeed. Yes, indeed, and it still exists.
Well, I know one of the questions people might ask, what sparked your interest in radio and then eventually in the television and broadcasting? What was there that said, I would like to explore that field?
Well, you know, many, many years ago, in my teenage years, I had a little radio. And I loved to listen to big band music at night, late at night. And I did that, and it just seemed like it was a world away from Carthage, Missouri, back in those days when you didn't do much traveling. And for a long, long time, I had never even been out of the town of Carthage and Joplin here. Mm-hmm. And I just got interested in it. And then I had a science teacher in high school who got me interested in radio in a different sense. We went into amateur radio. And back at that time, one other friend and I were the only two ham radio operators in the city of Carthage. And I just got more interested in radio. By this time, on ham radio, we talked around the world and around the country to people, mostly in Morse code. But it sparked my interest tremendously in addition to that. And a little later, I found out that getting a little more education in the electronics field, to begin with, that I could maybe, if I could pass the examination the FCC required for engineers to work in the broadcast field as transmitter and station operators, that I could find a way to make an entrance into the field of broadcasting, which I did, and sort of started that way and worked up over the years, beginning in the ranks of engineers to begin with.
So really understanding the technical side of what makes them work and the appreciation of how that actually does work. Imagine at that time, as you said, radio opened up the world to so many people.
That's true. That's true, because back, as I mentioned the other day, back just before World War II and during World War II, there were only about 500 radio broadcast stations in the whole United States. And it just was a wonderful field, and it was a little difficult to get into because it was rather limited in terms of the number of people working in it. But as science and technology began to unfold, and after the restrictions after the war were lifted, then more stations began to come on, and I tried to get right in on that beginning, the new beginning, I call it, of the broadcast field.
So you helped with the formation of a Joplin radio station, and the call letters at the time?
It was KSWM, and that stood for Southwest Missouri. And all the stations this side of the Mississippi River were required to start with the letter K, and on the east of the Mississippi River, they started with the letters W, and they still try to hold to that today.
Now, at that time, you were the second radio station, so
That's
you
true.
were starting competition for the first time in the Joplin market.
Well, yes, and also I had friends and was affiliated with the CBS network, which was called Columbia Broadcasting System at that time, and so being affiliated with them, we brought the CBS network into this area for the first time.
So the listeners were able to hear something that they perhaps had not heard before.
Yes, but knew about, but weren't able to receive.
Of course, even in those days as today, successful radio depends on people willing to buy your advertising to keep the station on the air. Was that an uphill struggle to actually convince people to advertise on radio?
That was quite a struggle. That was quite a struggle. With the first year or two, of course, were the most difficult. But then another reason, because of my CBS network affiliation, it made it much better for us because we built an audience much faster than we would have had we not had a network affiliation back at that time.
Now, radio today is entirely different than radio then. Describe for our audience, perhaps some of the younger members don't know what they would have heard on the radio at that time in the 1940s, the type of programming maybe.
Well, you know, in some senses it's the same, except the technology is quite different because of TV and so forth, but soap operas are still there today. But back in those days, I mean, soap operas and various kinds of musical programs were live productions. That's everybody was interested in live productions, and the networks made this possible more so. But local stations also had to rely on a lot of live productions that they put on, local talent and that sort of thing. And records had not quite reached the point where they were used as widely then. And gradually it became more and more music and records and disc jockeys and that sort of thing. But back at the beginning, there wasn't as much of that.
So you had a large staff or a large number of people who were able to actually come to the radio station and work and perform and be heard.
Yes, we did. We had a rather small staff when we first started, but we gradually got larger and were able to do quite a bit in that area.
Now then the thing called television came along, and that was a revolutionary time in the country, and it hit communities just like Joplin as well.
Yes, I had been hopefully waiting for quite a few years for the FCC to reach a point where they want to start authorizing station. It was held up for quite a while because of large corporation wrangling about what the standards were going to be, technical standards, and obviously we couldn't have a national TV thing unless there was one standard for everybody. And when they finally got some of those wrinkles worked out and started granting television stations, we had our application in there, and we were able finally to get on the air and start in on television.
So the television station was also called KSWM?
Yes, it was.
And
KSWM TV.
And that's the predecessor to what is now KODE here in Joplin.
That's correct. Channel 12. That's right.
Early days of television must have really been interesting as well. Local programming, was there a heavy emphasis on doing things along those lines?
Yes, there was. In fact, with the TV, we were able to do even more local programming than we had done on radio. For example, one of our first programs, particularly for the housewife in those days, excuse me, was a cooking show. And we had a lady who had a little experience in St. Louis that moved here with her husband, and she had been on one of the stations up in St. Louis. So we built a kitchen set right there in the studio, and we had a daily cooking show. Her name was Ermedine Arntz, and I'm not sure, but I think she still may be around here in this area. Ermedine Arntz had a wonderful cooking show. And we put on spelling bees and various kinds of productions. Back in radio, at Christmas time, we had a Santa Claus program type of thing where the kids would send in letters to Santa Claus, and then we had a wonderful person who was emulated Santa Claus's voice, and he would read the letters and talk to these people. When TV came along, we had to dress him up and put him in the studio in a Santa Claus suit, and supposed to be at the North Pole, and many kind. And we also began to do a few sports also, and it just seemed to open up much more live participation on a local basis than we had done before.
So really the community got involved in television.
Yes, very much so. Yes, and it was quite good.
The community, of course, radio and television stations are licensed to serve the community from the Federal Communications Commission. Was this one of the guiding factors as you were developing the stations, that we are here to serve the community?
Oh yes, I guess we were quite interested in local public service, what we call public service type thing, and it was a big factor in all of our programming. In fact, back then, excuse me, the FCC Commission, which was watching closely on everything that you did, were more stringent in absolutely requiring more public service time by stations devoted than they do today.
So you had to make sure you had so many X number of hours to fill.
Yes, and to get a license, you had to put out a pro forma program that was laid out, a typical example of the kind of programming you were going to do, and every certain percentages had to be this, certain percentages for public service, and so forth.
Now, when a lot of people think of the early days of television, one of the first things they mention is children's programming. They say, I remember watching after-school programs where somebody was hosting it from the television studio.
Yes, we did some children's program, and we had some of our staff people, Auntie Flo and Uncle Noah, and we would put on shows and bring kids into the studio. As a matter of fact, and also at a little older type students, my own daughter participated in a show that she put together for her high school classmates, and on Saturdays we had these young people in the studio and did a program, and they would dance and play music and just sort of and then have little interviews amongst themselves just to kind of build the interest of the teenagers.
And at that time, of course, music was really growing in teenagers' lives.
Oh, yes, indeed. Yes, it was.
So you really had a chance for them involvement. How about the early days of television news? You have a news crew covering what's happening in your community?
We unfortunately, excuse me, we were not able to do as much live pickup coverage outside the studio then because limitations of equipment development at that stage of the game and the size of our station did not, at the beginning, make possible very much live camera pickup outside the studios, but we had a camera crew that was doing it on film. And, you know, we didn't even, at the first couple of 3 years, we didn't even have videotape then. That came 4 or 5 years later when the first videotapes came out, where we could actually put on tape video programs. But we did it by film, movie camera film, and with voiceover. And we would go out and film some of these things and had to bring them back in, and then we would put this on, and then we'd do voiceover with the running of the film.
So the technology has changed tremendously, of course,
yes,
in television news.
It has indeed.
Now, while you were in Joplin and working with radio and television, you were also very active in the community. Do you feel that it's important for that aspect of community involvement to be not only a business person in the community, but to help out the community?
Yes, that was one of my great loves, was community service in terms of being a part of the community. And we tried to encourage all our staff people also, to whatever extent they could, to get involved in things in the community. And coming in as a competitive station and having to fight for our place in the business world also, it was even more important to be a part of that community in every way that we could. So we were members of the school board and Chamber of Commerce and church affiliations, and back then we had what we call the Ozark Playgrounds Association in Joplin, which was a big factor in trying to bring business and tourists into the area from all over the country. And we participated in just about every level that we could with whatever was going on in the town, public service-wise.
So this strengthened the community's ties to the station.
Well, we felt so, yes. We felt so.
Of course, you mentioned the school boards. You were on the Joplin School Board?
Yes, I was. I served 2 consecutive 3-year terms on the school board, and when I went off, another one of my associates in the station took my place. They ran, of course, this was an elective office, and he was elected to fill my place, and he served another 3 years. You know, a person beginning some major project can never do it on his own, and you cannot do it totally without the help of someone else. And I had some wonderful, wonderful people on my staff, and in particular two men that were just took the pressure off of me a lot because they did such a great job. One of them was Ron Robeson, whose name is well known to this community, and the other, D.T. Knight, who is well known in this community. And after I left Joplin, he continued for quite a number of years managing the station, and Ron also stayed quite a number of years, and then later actually became affiliated with the college here.
So you helped lay the footwork, the groundwork for people to successfully carry on the station.
Yes, you know, in a smaller community and TV and broadcasting, it's kind of like the baseball business. You kind of work your way up if you're good enough, and the better talent goes on to other places and bigger things. And so we constantly had to bring in new blood, because we were successful in one sense of the word, in that we had quite a few people who went on to bigger stations and bigger things from here.
You moved on. Now, you moved on as well yourself. You left Joplin,
Yes.
and then you continued pursuing education.
Yes, I did. I had always wanted to finish my college degree, which I had been unable to do because of the war work that I was called into doing, and I decided to apply to Harvard Business School, and was accepted for a master's degree program at Harvard. And so I took my family and went back east, and I've been there ever since.
But your involvement in broadcasting didn't stop there.
No. It just sort of came to me. I wasn't looking for it at the time, but I was approached by some very influential people and asking me, because I was in Massachusetts then, if I would help set up a station, get a new station started in Boston. And I guess it's like an old war horse. I couldn't refuse, so I ended up getting back into television again in the 5th largest market in market in the country at that time. May still be, I'm not sure. But anyway, a large city and a large area. And so I pioneered UHF television there in that city. And it's still a successful station, and since then there have been quite a few more added to the city of Boston.
That must have been quite a challenge with a major metropolitan or a big city like that to
yes, it was.
Start up a station.
Yes, it was. But I had, over the years, built up a large friendship throughout broadcasting circles and governmental circles also. And the advertising, we didn't have our local salesman out talking to each individual businessman like we did in this market, because practically all the business was done through agencies. So our salespeople were working with the agency people all the time, and it was really quite a challenge, but we succeeded.
Was the emphasis on community involvement still there in a larger city, that you still were serving the community through what the station was doing?
Yes, even more so. The pressure to get into the market and to be favorably looked upon by the FCC Commission dictated that we do that. So it was a wider scope of public service type things with all kinds of community and city activities.
What about the aspect of UHF? People, even now, they look at the TV, you've got the VHF and the UHF, and U sometimes is always that, quote, other category.
Well, it was quite difficult at the beginning, even though it was a large city, because at that time the television sets did not have UHF on them. You had to depend on a little thing called a converter that tuned in the UHF, and then it converted it into a VHF signal that put it into your regular television. So what this required was the encouragement of people to put on something that they wanted to see badly enough that they would buy this converter and put up the separate antenna. It was quite difficult. So, but we were fortunate enough in that up to that time, the limited number of VHF stations mostly concentrated on network programming and some large local production, had not yet done very much sports broadcasting. We had to find some kind of a thing that a large number of the population would be interested in to see that they couldn't see somewhere else. Sports was it. And fortunately, we were able to make an arrangement with 5 of the major universities around Boston. It was Boston University and Harvard and Tufts and Northeastern and Boston College and Boston, 5 or 6 of the large universities to broadcast their sports. So, and this was all on a local basis. We were not going out across the country to follow the teams to other cities, but on the local basis, when some, like Boston University, might have a football or basketball team that was playing away somewhere, but usually almost every week and every day there was at least one of these colleges that was doing a game locally, so we were able to keep our schedule pretty well filled up with sports. And Boston is a fantastic sports-minded area, and so we were able to get conversion to UHF quite rapidly there.
So you really carved your niche in the market of people who wanted to watch.
Yes, and also one of the commissioners at that time, FCC, Bob Lee, he had taken on himself the mantle of really being the chief promoter of UHF and separate programming from network programming. And it made made it a little more possible for us to get things done.
So you were one of the pioneers of sports programming on local stations as well, as you went across the country.
We were in that community, yes, in that community.
And today, of course, sports dominate. They have their own networks, and they've become such a big business.
Oh, yes.
What's going on in the growth?
It's growing by leaps and bounds. It's one of the big things today.
Your career has also followed technological developments, and as broadcasting and communication has changed over the years, you have been involved in those changes of communication technologies as well.
Well, in the broad sense, communications in the broad sense, and you know, because of so many different kinds of things that are available today because of digital technology and ultra-high frequency microwave techniques that were not available hadn't been developed yet at the beginning, has brought other types of channels where you can go. It's sort of compartmentalized in a sense, because a person can't be in all these fields at once. So you select the one where you feel the most interest and that you feel you have the most opportunity, and you it's more of a specialization today on the part of individuals. Well, I became interested in other forms of technique, and having been associated for a time with NASA, I began to know a little bit more about some of the things that were coming on in the future in terms of satellite transmission and communications of that sort. And so I became involved in some other work that led to the development of satellite communications and the development of more competition in the overall communications field, like in the telephone, digital technology, and that sort of thing.
So there are pioneers every step along the way as things are being developed in communications.
It will never end. It will never end. There's more opportunities now, as I said, in so many different specialized, and yet they are to some degree all related because of digital technology, whether it be a company that's in a big business of some product having nothing to do with communication, still it's interrelated soon because of the electronic digital control systems that's used today.
It's tying everything together.
Yes,
to working out. Now, at the awards ceremony at Missouri Southern, you made a nice comment that pioneers are not necessarily people of the past, that there are people out there pioneering today.
Oh, absolutely. It's going on right now in many areas, and will continue to. Things just keep opening up. And one thing, you know, sometimes it's little increments of change and improvement over this or that. And then suddenly something that's been worked on for quite a while, it'll be a quantum jump rather than just, and each one of these things leads to more things sprouting out from it. And so it's continuing. It's continuing forever, as far as I can see. It's been going on since time began.
So many opportunities for the future, and for our viewers, there's much more to come.
Oh, absolutely. The opportunities are greater now than they've ever been in history. Yes.
Mr. Harrison, I'd like to thank you very much for taking the time to visit us while here.
Oh, you're quite welcome, and I enjoyed it so much. And I want to thank you too, and the people at the college, and the wonderful Joplin area community that's been so good to me over so many, many years.
Well, thank you, and once again, congratulations on your award.
Oh, thank you so much. It certainly was an honor, and greatly appreciated.
Thank you. And I'd like to thank the viewers for joining us this week on this special edition of Newsmakers. Hope you can join me again next week at the same time on the station. I'll see you then.